Well, good morning and welcome to today's Intelligent Accounts Payable Automation webinar. My name is Bill Dawes and I'm today here to introduce our main speaker, rapidMATION CEO and General Expert Sean Lysigeng, as well as assisting with the Q&A following his presentation. So if you have any questions during the session, pop them into the Q&A chat facility, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer them at the end. In my role as the publisher and editor of Information and Data Manager, a magazine and newsletter for the ANZ market, which you can see up on your screen, I spend a lot of time focused on the challenge of digital transformation in enterprise and government. Accounts payable automation is often a first toe in the water for organisations looking to eliminate manual processes, so it's an important area to focus on. If you're still managing invoice processing and accounts payable manually, then your business or organisation is missing out on significant opportunities. Manually receiving invoices, matching them against purchase orders, confirming the expenses are legitimate and within policy, confirming that the goods have been received, then making payments all takes time. Unless you have an automated accounts payable solution in place, your business is likely wasting significant amounts of time and money managing invoice processing and payment workflow. This does require a digital transformation to take place within your organisation, and that's not always something that is simple to accomplish, as I've found. IDM recently surveyed a number of major enterprise and government organisations in Australia. Our most recent survey looked to find out where they stood on the path to digital transformation. So I thought it would be interesting to begin today by taking a look at some of the conclusions. Here's a quick overview of those we surveyed. The survey was conducted online, about 100 or so responses, and like the IDM newsletter, the readership skews towards medium to large enterprise and government, the kind of organisation that have dedicated informational records management roles on staff, as you can see from this slide. Then, I'll follow this, we have a brief look at the spread of verticals in those who responded, showing that the digital transformation drive is industry-wide. As you can see, we had a good response from government, where the importance of digital 2020 program is looking at the digital transformation, but otherwise across a broad range of sectors. Okay, let's look at some of the results, which will give us a bit of a snapshot of thinking around digital transformation, in which accounts payable plays an important part. Firstly, the question was, has your organisation begun digital transformation of manual and paper-based processes? The results show the vast majority are either planning, testing or implementing, which is as it should be. And I'm not sure what that 7% have got no plans think they're doing. I guess they're just happy with where they are. Next, how easy it is to find the right information or documents quickly within your business. A remarkable 6% say it is difficult to find the right information or documents quickly within their business. There's no doubt when it comes to purchase orders, invoices and contracts, your financial team just cannot do its job effectively if they have trouble getting their hands on them. It's one simple win from automating AP. But, of course, there are roadblocks. This set of responses outlines some interesting challenges. For a very lucky few, the ones down the bottom, they were able to tick the box saying no roadblocks, we're all digital, illustrating how much work is yet to be done. From the accounts payable perspective, it's interesting to note the high number of those who responded stating that they retain manual processes because staff prefer paper, they needed to retain traditional approval workflow processes, and the traditional bugbear, the inability to replace legacy systems. I'm sure many of those viewing today will have had similar experiences. The next question drilled down a little further into the factors that are hindering digital transformation. Too many competing priorities top the list, and it's typical of many or most IT initiatives. The high number who responded with fear of change and internal resistance highlights the importance of senior management buy-in. The demonstrated ROI for accounts payable automation should be sufficient to overcome the next roadblock, insufficient funding, and ensure that executive buy-in that you will need to push through that the fear of change factors, and which are very highlighted. Lastly, before we move into the main presentation, which is going to present a very smart solution for AP, I thought it would be worth reviewing the responses we received when we asked companies what technologies they are investing in to assist digital transformation. There's no denying the global push to take key applications such as CRM off internal servers, and this came through strongly with the cloud as the big #1 response. However, it's surprising to see OCR, optical character recognition, listed so highly, considering it's such a mature technology. But this just goes to show how many organisations are still trapped in paper-based and manual workflows in 2019. Which of course is the reason we're all here today. So it's high time I hand it over to Sean Lysigeng, CEO and co-founder of rapidMATION, to outline the solutions they have developed for intelligent digital automation.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bill. So by way of introduction, my name's Sean. I head up the company here at rapidMATION. And rapidMATION are all about something called intelligent automation. Well, that's kind of a new word out there in the market today. And just to describe to you what intelligent automation is, it's actually a combination of 3 different technologies that have come together over the past year or so. So the first part of that is something called digital process automation. And digital process automation is all about taking a paper-based form, digitizing it, putting it on your mobile, tablet, or desktop device, bringing in data from a variety of your different back-end systems, and then being able to route that task around to different people to get approvals or decline or those types of things. And really, digital process automation is all about the human aspects of an automation process. The next part is robotic process automation, and this has really come to the forefront over the last few years. A robotic process automation process is really about teaching a software bot that sits on your machine to do the clicks that you and I as humans would do. So a simple example that I always use, if I have a spreadsheet of 1,000 rows and I need to copy that into an SAP or an Oracle or a JD Edwards type system, I can create one of these little software bots to go through and perform that piece of work for me. The final part of the intelligent automation landscape is actually infusing some of those processes with artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence, if you read anything out there in the news today, it's going to take away our jobs. We don't look at it like that. And artificial intelligence is really being infused into some of these digital process automation and robotic process automation solutions to be able to make them more intelligent. And I'm going to show you a few examples of how we use artificial intelligence in an intelligent accounts payable process. Just so you know, the final part that we actually do in rapidMATION is chatbots. And chatbots are those little bots that pop up on the bottom right-hand side of many websites that ask you if they can help you or guide you through different things that you may do on a day-to-day basis. So really a combination of those different things defines what intelligent automation is. And as it says on that slide there, rapidMATION is all about automating processes that use both humans and software bots. So in order to do this, we had a look around when we founded rapidMATION of what the best of breed partners are in each of these different areas. And the partners that we have, and these are specifically technology partners that we use and implement their software, are those 4 companies that you see up in front of you right now. Now, some of you may not have heard of one or more of those companies, so let's have a quick look about what each of those companies do. The first one we're going to look at today is a company called Abby. And Abby is seen as one of the market leaders in what we call content intelligence. So really what that means is Abby provides me the ability to take any unstructured document, for example, an invoice, and be able to extract all the details from that invoice. So for example, I could extract all the individual line items, I could extract the GST amounts or the total amounts. And once I've extracted all of these different pieces of information, I can then actually use those inside a business process and inside an automation to do a variety of different things with them. Now, very recently, Abby have also acquired a company called Timeline PI. And I'm going to show you guys an example of Timeline PI in action today in specifically an accounts payable scenario. But Timeline PI is really a great tool where if you don't know where to get started on your intelligent automation journey, you can actually feed this tool 3 pieces of data, which would be a date timestamp, a step inside a workflow process, and some common identifier, which in an invoice or in an accounts payable scenario could be an invoice ID. And it actually graphs out what actually happens inside your process today. With the whole goal, it actually allows you to assign costings to each part of the process so that before you actually even start automating this process, you can see what value you may be able to get out of by automating this process. So a very, very cool tool that we're using with customers today. The next piece of software that I'm going to show you today is something called K2. And K2 is what we use for the digital process automation platform. So K2 is all about being able to create digital forms, being able to bring in data from a variety of different back-end systems, and then to be able to create enterprise-grade workflow behind some of these forms. So basically, a simple example is I could go out for a coffee with someone, I could snap the receipt from the coffee that we've just had, and by submitting a form, I could actually start a workflow process that would then go to a task assigned to my direct reporting manager, who could then approve or decline that expense. And then the K2 workflow process could automatically write that data into a finance system like SAP. But really, this is all about the human elements of process. and it allows you to build apps that connect people, processes, and data. The final part of the puzzle is really something called UiPath, and this is a really great tool that's come to the forefront in recent years. UiPath claim they're one of the fastest growing enterprise software companies in history. And if you've not heard of UiPath before, this is really where we can create these robotic process automation pieces. So as it says there, this is a great article from the Wall Street Journal. And I love this because it says, hello, we're UiPath. We make robots so people don't have to be robots. And UiPath is all about automating the mundane, repetitive tasks that you and I all have in our day-to-day jobs. So when it comes to accounts payable, how do all of these technologies come together? Well, really, when we speak to customers, and I'm speaking to many, many customers out there today who are very challenged by their accounts payable processes, and the challenges range from things like poor data entry to disappearing invoices, or even to delayed manual approvals inside this accounts payable process. And obviously, some of these things can result in a variety of different outcomes. Some things involve lost funds or slow and inconsistent processing of these invoices, but these all cost businesses a huge amount of time and money. So with this in mind, companies have to find an intelligent way to be able to minimize these gaps and errors that exist within this process. So just before I tell you a bit more about our solution, I'm going to open up a quick poll. And what you'll see now is on the poll, it will start come up on your screen, and you will see that it will start come up for you now. I encourage you to please just go through and click an answer on the poll. So what we're asking is, we're asking you, where are you on your accounts payable journey? And the options are, we haven't just started yet, we're evaluating options, we have something in place, but we're always interested to see what else is out there, or we already have a great solution in place. And I can see the answers coming in, so thank you very much for putting those in. And this really ties back to some of the slides that Bill showed you in the beginning of what's actually happened and where, when people were surveyed around digital transformation, what they were seeing. So just to give you some insights into the results that I'm seeing on the poll here, we have 42% of people saying that they are currently evaluating options. We have 0% of people that actually have said that they haven't started just yet, which is interesting. And we have another 42% of people saying that they have something in place, but they're always interested to see what else is out there. And I have 17% of people that say that already have a great solution in place. So thank you very much for all your feedback on that. But let's go see what we can offer inside this intelligent accounts payable automation space. So some of the things that we have put together is we put together an accounts payable solution that weaves together these market-leading technologies from Avi, K2, and UiPath. And really, when we looked at this problem and what customers were actually having issues with in the accounts payable space, I realized that why this problem hasn't been solved so well before is because often it's a very complex problem, and that you need to weave together one or more of these technologies to be able to solve this problem intelligently. And what we did is we went away and we looked at some of these market-leading technologies, and we put them together, and we created a base solution that you can use out of the box. But the best thing about this solution that we put together is it's like a big box of Lego. So both K2 and UiPath is like a big box of Lego where you can build your own car, plane, or train. And what I mean by that is it has a number of these accelerated components that I can drag and drop onto a design canvas. But what that really allows me to do, it allows me to create and build up and automate an accounts payable process exactly the way that your business runs their accounts payable process. So an example of that could be, some people might use SAP or JD Edwards or Oracle or Dynamics CRM as some of their systems. But really what I can do is I can pull in data using either K2 or UiPath from these systems, and I can push data to these systems by using these great market-leading components and software platforms that we use. So let's go through and take a walkthrough of what an intelligent accounts payable process could look like. Now, the first thing that I want to point out is this doesn't have to be exactly how you would run your process, and this is purely an example. What I want to remind you of is that big box of Lego that I told you about, and we've actually created a vast variety of different types of account payable solutions for different customers that allow them to run their process their way. Now, I'll frame this for you in a bit of a story. And the first thing is we started to work with a customer who had an accounts payable process in place, but this was a very manual accounts payable process. So they hadn't done any automation as of yet. They were drowning in some of the paperwork around this. And what they decided to do was to come to us and say to us, hey guys, is there a way that you can help us to figure out which part of this process we should actually start with? So as I mentioned, there's a really great tool from Abby called Timeline PI. And the image you actually see up in front of you is some of the data that we actually uploaded into Timeline PI. And as a reminder, we really need 3 pieces of data. In this specific scenario, we gathered this data manually because most of the process was manual. There were some automated pieces of this process. So we created a big spreadsheet of 3 pieces of data, a date timestamp of when one of these events happened. So an event could be, I don't know, invoice received or invoice paid. We included in that spreadsheet that workflow step, so invoice received or invoice paid. And then we included something like an invoice ID so that we could weave together different of these invoices to see which parts of the process each of these invoices would have taken. And what we did is once we uploaded this into Timeline PI, it allows us to do a variety of slicing and dicing of all of this data. But really, I love this image because what you can see down the left-hand side, it shows me all the different steps that may happen inside an invoice approval process. But really what it starts to do is it graphs out what my most common scenarios are. And there you can see the gray highlighted box shows you that that process is followed 43% of the time. And as I move further towards the right-hand side, you can see all the exceptions that may happen inside this process that happen less often. Now, why this is really great and really powerful is because if I didn't know where to start or what I should automate, I can use a tool like this to figure out which is the most popular part of this process, and I can start by automating the most popular part. I always say to our customers that you need to remember that you don't necessarily always have to automate 100% of your process. I always say there's an 80-20 rule. And if I can automate 80% of any process, that's going to save you heaps of time. And what I can tell you is in the 20% of processes, that's really where 80% of the complexity actually lies by all of the exception scenarios that you're going to try automate. Now, while it should always be our goal to automate 100% of the process, you can always start with this 80% use case, get that going, which will save you heaps of time, free up your team to do higher value tasks. And this is a great tool that can show you where you would like to, or where you should start. Now, the next little automation that I'll show you here is I can actually go through, and once I have this data inside the Timeline PI tool, it actually shows me visually what it looks like and what the most common path of the process is. You'll see all these little green, amber, and red dots running around the screen. And really what that shows me is the green is where processes are flowing, or the parts of the process are flowing really well. And where you can see some of those red dots is really where there might be some bottlenecks or where things are slowing down. So again, by using a number of these different reports and tools that Abby Timeline PI gives me, I can slice and dice this and delve into very specific parts of the process to see what's happening there, and then go through and make sure that I can obviously streamline the process and make sure that I can free up resources to make sure that this gets processed in a timely manner. Now, the thing to know is this is not just a one and done tool. Basically what it means is while I can use this in the beginning stages of my process, what I can do is I can continually feed the data into Timeline PI. And what this will allow me to do is to continually evolve my process to make sure it is the most streamlined version of the process that I would like to run. So what we did with this customer is once we actually figured out where we'd like to start, what we started is we started automating that 80% use case for them. And as we know, invoices come in a variety of shapes and forms, multiple line items, single line items. Not one invoice generally ever looks the same. So what we did is we started with some of these digital invoices. And the first thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to provide this customer the ability for their suppliers to send these invoices in via email to a central accounts payable mailbox. So in this case, in this scenario, we've created a mailbox called accountspayable@rapidMATION.com. And what that meant is someone could create an invoice and automatically email it into the central inbox. Now, what we did behind the scenes is once this email came in, we had a little process that was running and was waiting to receive new emails inside this email inbox. So as soon as an email hit the accounts payable mailbox, Really what this did is it woke up a little process. And in this scenario, we use some out-of-the-box connectivity from Abby into Exchange to be able to pick up and know when there was new invoices that came into that email inbox. Now, the first part of, or the first step in an invoice approval process is really for a human user to review this invoice and make sure that we manage to extract all the details correctly from that invoice. So the screen you're seeing right now is a screen from Abby and a tool from their tool called Flexi Capture. And really what this does, as soon as this email comes in, it starts a batch. And what I can do is I can actually open up this batch. And what you'll see is that Abby has gone through and it's automatically classified for me what type of document this is. Now, while Abby is seen as a market leader in the invoice space or accounts payable space, Abby doesn't just do that, and it does a wide variety of different documents, which can range from contracts to legal documents to anything in between. And Abby has some smarts where it can actually figure out which process or which document it's actually looking at. So there you can see it's looped through all of the pages in this specific document, and with 98% certainty, it's realized that this document is an invoice. The next part that it's done is I can actually open up this invoice, and this provides me a screen where I can see the invoice on the right-hand side, and I can see all of the details that Abby has automatically managed to extract from this invoice on the left-hand side. Now, the first thing you'll see is there's a few red letters and numbers on the left-hand side. And what this is showing to me is Abby's telling me, hey, Sean, have a look at these. I believe I've got these right, but cast your attention over here just to make sure that I managed to extract these details correctly. Now, the great thing is down the bottom left-hand side is I can create a number of different rules and checks and balances on these invoices that Abby will automatically do for me in the background. In this scenario, there's no errors. There's just some warnings that have come up, and it's told me that the invoice date is older than 6 weeks, and there's no purchase order in the purchase order set. So this is just giving me details as a human user of all of the things that Abby's managed to do automatically on this specific invoice. The great thing about Abby is if it hasn't managed to automatically pick up some details on this invoice, I can go through and I can actually click on an area on the invoice on the right-hand side, and I can teach Abby exactly where it needs to pick up this data from. Now, Abby has got years and years of experience in the invoice space, so they actually have a full invoice project where they've put heaps of their knowledge over many years into invoices in, but there's always going to be a couple of invoices that may come in where Abby may not automatically recognize where there are certain parts on that invoice. So a great part of the Abby tool is the ability for me to go and teach and train Abby where those parts of the invoice are that it needs to extract, which means next time it comes in and this invoice comes in, Abby can automatically pick it up for me. Now, the first thing that we do now is once that we have all the details extracted from this invoice, what I'm going to go through and do is I'm automatically going to go call a K2 process. And as a reminder, K2 is all about the digital process automation, and that's about looping humans into this workflow process. So Abby extracts all those details for me. It passes those to K2. A K2 process starts off, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to send an email notification out to that supplier that submitted that invoice to update them and notify them that that invoice has been submitted for payments and it's been received, and that it will be processed shortly. Now, this is just a great way to keep the supplier up to date that something is happening on our end. So there you can see an email notification that's been sent out to JLG Industries in this case. The next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to go through and we're going to assign a task to someone internally inside our organization to go through and do some quality assurance on this specific invoice. So there's many ways you can notify a human user that they have a task inside K2. In this scenario here, I've crafted an email notification, and I've given that user some context on who this invoice is from. I've attached the invoice to this email, and you can see in the body of the email there, I've automatically included some details on the specific invoice, and those details are the details that Abby has automatically extracted from that invoice for me. Now, what I can do is I can automatically click on that link in the email to open up the form where I can review this invoice, or I can use something called Smart Actions where I can simply reply back to this email with either review, insufficient details, or duplicates, which would automatically action this task for me. So as I come in here, you'll see that I've now come into an area that K2 provides for me, and this is called a workspace. And this is really a workspace where I will be able to review all of my tasks and things that I might need to do on these invoices. So on the top of the screen there, you'll see that there's a new task on my task list, and I can go through and I can actually click on this task to be able to go through and action it. Now, the really great thing about a human workflow engine is once I have a task on my task list, I can do a number of different things with this task. As an example, if I forget to action this task, I can perform an escalation and I can poke or prod or nudge a specific user to remind them that they need to do this task. Or perhaps I can pick up this task and I can redirect it to another user, which will allow me to process this invoice before a specific deadline date is reached. The first thing that I can actually do is I can come in here is once I open up this task, you can see I can review the invoice on the left-hand side. I can see all of the details that Abby's managed to extract on the right-hand side. And I, as a human user, can now go through and I can verify that everything has been verified on the specific invoice. There's a great number of checks that we can automatically perform behind this invoice. One of the most common problems we're seeing at the moment out there is with invoice fraud and people getting invoices that look legitimate and replacing bank account details with illegitimate bank account details. So what happens is this invoice comes in, it looks like one that I would often deal with, but what's happened is someone has updated the bank account details to another company or to another individual, which means that that invoice gets paid incorrectly out to someone else. Now what we can do is in this QA stage, we can surface up all of those checks and balances so that a human user can come through and make sure that all those checks and balances have been reviewed. And once they've actually verified it, they can go through and they can submit this for approval. Now, what would happen is once the invoice goes through the approval cycle, we can do some really great things using the K2 workflow engine. So as an example, if the invoice is under $1,000, perhaps we'll only send it for one level of approval, but perhaps if it was between $1,000 and $5,000, we'd send it for 2 levels of approval. Or perhaps if it was anything over $50,000, we'd need to send that directly to the CFO for approval. So all of those nice routing scenarios can be handled very easily by the workflow engine. But in this case, because the invoice is only $586, I've gone through and I've assigned a task to one of the users inside the organization who will now need to go through and approve or reject the invoice. Now, one of the things that's happened with this specific invoice is we already had a purchase order that has been pushed in and associated with this invoice. Now, generally, purchase orders sit in different systems. And in this specific example, all of our purchase order details sat inside a system called SAP. So what we wanted to do is when we assigned a task for this human user to approve or decline this invoice, what we did is we kicked off a little UiPath software bot to take that purchase order number and automatically go and log into SAP in the background and get all the details of that purchase order so that when we assigned a task to that human user to approve or decline that invoice, we could show them what the invoice was and all of the details that were included as part of the purchase order. So the user could come in now and they could see all the purchase order details down the right-hand side. They could review what the invoice was for and all the amounts, including payment details and the like. And what they did is they get a task, and at the top of the task, they get an instruction. And in this case, the instruction was, please review the below invoice and ensure that the extracted data is correct. Once reviewed, please either approve or reject the invoice. And what this human user can do is they can provide some comments and they can decide to either approve or decline this specific invoice. In this scenario, what we did is this user approved the invoice because everything looked good. The purchase order matched with the invoice amount. So again, what we did is we automatically sent out an email notification to the specific supplier to say, hey there, your invoice that you submitted has been approved, and this payment will be processed on the invoice due date, which in this scenario was the 11th of September 2019. We also provided all the comments that approver provided as part of that approval back to the supplier so they could see and had full visibility into what was actually happening with this specific invoice. What happens then is we automatically drop this invoice onto a payment queue, and there you can see the red highlighted box shows you that this is on an upcoming invoices payment queue, and what we can see is this invoice is now awaiting payments. And what's happening now is we never want to pay this invoice before it's due, because obviously what we want to do is we want to keep the cash in the bank and earn interest and use that cash to fund our business. So what's happening in the background is there's a process that runs every day to then see when the invoice due date is hit. And if it figures out that today's the 11th of September and the invoice is due on the 11th of September, what we actually do is we trigger off a little UiPath software bot. And what this software bot is going to do for me, it's going to run once a day. And if it finds any invoices that are due for payment that day, what it's going to do is it's actually going to go through and make a payment for that invoice for me. So let's have a little look at what this UiPath software bot looks like in action. Here we'll see that the UiPath software bot is kicked off, and what it's doing is it's going through and it's automatically logging into me to an internet banking payment portal. It's picked up all the details of that specific invoice and what needs to be paid. It's picked up the biller code and the reference details and all the descriptions and the amounts. And this little UiPath software bot has automatically gone through, run on that specific date, and made the payment for me for that specific invoice. Now, many people are quite shocked by that and often say, hey, well, I would never actually let a UiPath software bot log in on my behalf and automatically make payments for me for invoices. But really, this is just one of many scenarios of how UiPath can be used in this scenario. And in this specific customer's case, they were dealing with a number of different transactions that were coming in on a daily basis that were less than $100. And someone was spending a huge amount of their day purely processing these $100 or sub $100 invoices. So in this scenario, we created this UiPath software bot for them. It took away all of that mundane tasks that this user needed to do. But what we did is we put some checks and balances in place. We set internet banking up to say that you could never do a transaction over $100. And we put a number of other checks and balances, which made sure that this customer was very happy with this bot going through and making the payments for them. Now, once that bot had finished and it actually made the payments for that specific invoice, what you see is it actually moved from the upcoming invoices tab across to the paid invoices tab. And now I have the ability to go search across any invoices that have been paid. So if anyone came to me and said to me, hey, Sean, what is the status of this specific invoice number? I could very easily come in here and see exactly where that invoice was, when it was paid, who approved it, and all of those nice things. So just to summarize what you saw there, the first thing I showed you is I showed you that tool Timeline PI. And what that did is provided you the process analysis and it allowed you to analyze the different process paths. The next thing that I showed you is how we used Abby to obviously monitor that email inbox, which imported those different invoices as soon as they arrived. What Abby did for us there, it did some recognition around that specific invoice. And then what it allowed me to do was to go through and verify and make sure that Abby had extracted all the details correctly. If it had extracted all the details correctly, we could pass that straight through. But the most important part there is if there was a new invoice that it didn't manage to recognize, we could train Abby to recognize that invoice next time around. And then what it did with all of those invoice details, it gave me all of that data that I could then use inside a process. So what I did then is I passed that off to K2, which is that advanced human workflow engine. And what I did there is I used K2 to handle all the full multi-level approval flow around that invoice. And that was everything from QA around the invoice to do invoice checks to make sure that it was a valid invoice, to even then go through and actually get approval from someone in the business for us to be able to go out and pay that invoice. Where we used UiPath in that scenario is UiPath was used to automate all the mundane and repetitive tasks. The first part that we used UiPath for was to automatically go look up the purchase order details from SAP and provide that back to the human user inside that K2 form to be able to approve or decline that invoice. And then what we did finally is once the invoice was approved, we performed the clicks on the screen to make sure that that internet banking payment was made, and we updated that invoice to paid. And updated the supplier to let them know that that invoice was paid for them. So it was really a great scenario to show you an end-to-end intelligent accounts payable solution. It weaved together the worlds of both Abby, K2, and UiPath. And really, when we speak to customers, this becomes more and more prominent that you need to weave together one or more of those technologies to be able to solve this problem intelligently. So many people ask, well, why would I go through and automate an accounts payable process? Well, here's some great stats that we've gathered for you, and I'll read them out to you. So AP automation has reduced costs within many organizations by 50%, and in some cases by 80%. That's a pretty crazy stat to say that by automating this, we've freed up human users' time to do more higher value tasks, and we've automated almost 50% of some of the manual processing around these invoices. Another one says to us that invoice writing and approval times are reduced by 80 to 90% of the time, which results in lower costs and fewer late fees and penalties. I mean, that's a pretty crazy stat to say that if you can automate this process, we can process things 80 to 90% faster. The next one is around invoice exceptions and says that 43% less invoice exceptions happen. And I can imagine that if people are reviewing all of these invoices manually to do all these checks and balances, there's a lot of things that could actually slip through there. And obviously, if we can obviously automate some of that stuff, we can handle less exceptions, or we can handle more exceptions should we need to. The next one is nearly 62% of invoice processing costs are made up of staff labor. Obviously, staff and labor are very expensive in the Australian market and many places around the world. So if we can actually free up people's time, what this allows us to do is drop the cost of invoice processing and obviously automate many of these different flows. So if you did want to watch this Intelligent Accounts Payable solution in action, what we've got is we've put together a really great demonstrator that's up on the rapidMATION website. You can head across to that blog post. Up on our blog, we put together a great video that shows you end-to-end intelligent automation in action around invoice processing. So I encourage you to go check that out. The next part is we have actually come across this so many times out in the market from customers that we speak with. So we've actually put together a base accounts payable solution. And the base accounts payable solution, you can go through and you can browse on the K2 Solution Showcase, or even if you head across to UiPath Go, you'll go see some more details around our accounts payable solution. Again, what I want to reiterate is while this is a base solution, you can obviously go customize this to run your intelligence account payable solution your way, and we would just reconfigure some of those Lego blocks to exactly the way your organization runs. We've also really created a blog series because we've had a lot of customers that we work with being very interested in this space. So it's a 3-post blog series. The first one is just introducing you to an intelligent accounts payable solution. Again, that's all up on the rapidMATION blog. The next series in that blog post is around intelligent ways to prevent accounts payable fraud. This talks to things like 3-way matching and bank account fraud and how we've actually handled that and solved some of those problems for our customers. And then the third part is telling some customer stories around just some ways that people have used a variety of K2, Abby, and UiPath to solve their specific accounts payable scenario. So there's some great case studies there which you can go read about and how we've solved that for different of our customers. All right, well, I think that brings us to the end of our session today. I wanted to open it up for some Q&A. So Bill, let me hand back to you. Are there any items in the Q&A panel? I can see there's some here, Bill. So what I will just...
Yeah, sorry about that, Sean. We've got a question here from one of our attendees on, do you have any integration with Adirant's expense management and accounts payable system?
Very interesting. So thanks, Paul. Good question. So yes, from that perspective, if I remind you, it's kind of like a big box of Lego, right? So K2 has that beautiful piece of technology called Smart Objects, and Smart Objects allows K2 to go and fetch data from a large variety of different systems. I'm not aware that they have something specifically to Adirant, but really what that means is that's where the power of UiPath comes in, because UiPath, it does the clicks that you and I as a human user would do on a screen, which means that we could go push off a task to one of these UiPath software bots to go and read and write data directly from Adirant's expense management and accounts payable systems. So we can weave that into our scenario very, very easily using a great solution like UiPath. And that's why this intelligent accounts payable solution, combining these technologies, is so powerful, because we can integrate with any of the existing systems that may be out there. Great, thanks for that one, Bill.
And I have another question here. How does UiPath application work in replicating user keystrokes?
That's a very good one. So UiPath has a number of different recorders available in it. And what a recorder is a recorder you can start the recorder and you can start doing clicks on a screen. You can open up websites, you could open up, I don't know, SAP systems. And what UiPath is going to do, it's automatically going to record your keystrokes with the whole idea that you can actually create one of these automations based off of that recording. So it's a very, very advanced piece of technology that allows you to do that. That can range from websites to SAP systems to anything in between. And it's a really great way to very quickly and easily create these automations using UiPath. I know there's a great UiPath event coming up next week where I know they will be announcing some other cool technology that makes it even easier for them to be able to actually come through and monitor which things you do on a day-to-day basis and intelligently suggest how you could actually automate those. So keep a lookout for that. We'll put some blog posts up on the rapidMATION blog as well around some of those things.
Great. And now here's another question. Can you please explain how you identify a false bank account number on an invoice?
Yeah, very good question. So we've done that in a variety of ways. The first thing is obviously Abby extracts the bank account details from us using their intelligent OCR capabilities. What we first do is we keep a list of all previous payments that we've actually done for a specific supplier and what the BSP number and the account number is for that specific supplier. So the first thing that we do when an invoice comes in is one of the checks we do is we check in the new incoming invoice, does this match the last payment we made to this specific supplier in terms of BSP and account number and the like. If it doesn't match, we automatically push a task out to a human user to go and actually investigate what's happening in that specific, I guess, invoice. So the first thing that many people do is we assign a task to a human user. The human user is the first thing before they process that invoice any further, then make a call directly to the supplier to check if those bank account details have actually been updated. And it's a great way to be able to catch to see if there's any false bank accounts numbers submitted with an invoice.
Great. And is Abby only able to handle invoices?
No, it's a very good question as well. While Abby are very well known for handling invoices and seen as the best of breed, certainly in accounts payable and invoices, they can do a wide variety of unstructured documents, and they really have a full content intelligence platform. So that can range from, I guess, reading handprints in kind of online forms that you filled in, where it's kind of those blocks and lines, you've got to put letters in between it. They do anything from that. Some of that happens in employee onboarding scenarios or leave request scenarios or anything like that. But please know that once you have the Abby platform, it's not just about invoices, it's about any unstructured content or data.
Great. Well, look, thanks for a very comprehensive presentation. I don't think we have any more live questions available.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Bill. So what I'll do is, if there are any other questions that come up, as I said, we're dealing with a lot of accounts payable scenarios on a day-to-day basis. People are finding immense value in being able to weave together these technologies. If I can ever help you with a custom demo or provide you some more info, or even just to brainstorm ideas, feel free to reach out to me on sean@rapidMATION.com. Keep an eye out for the blog. We're always posting great customer stories on there. And I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Thank you very much.